I'm gonna hit record and we can talk. So here's the list of review sheet topics. I sent this to you, I think more than a week ago, at least 1 week ago. What is there to say? We went over the formatting. I'm gonna try to be a psychic and guess that you guys might have some formatting questions for me, so I'm happy to answer them. But I also did already explain the formatting, so I don't want to bore you if you already know it. So feel free to ask whatever you want to ask. If you have questions about formatting, I'm happy to answer those. If you have questions about specific items, I'm happy to answer those. This is the last time we'll see each other before the exam, which will be on Thursday during class. I ask that people who are registered, please come if it's possible, and if you don't have COVID. If it is not possible and you do have COVID, obviously you should stay home. So anyways, but yeah, it'll be on Moodle. I think I've said that before, but in case it wasn't clear, it'll be on Moodle. I haven't posted it yet. I've got it, on my hard drive, but it's not up online yet. And so I'll post that in the next couple days, and then you can take it on Moodle. I'll put the link in the chat at the beginning of class next time too, so you can access it that way. The time limit will be 75 minutes, just like our normal class is. And yeah, maybe that's enough of that. So any questions about anything? Specific items, formatting, anything at all? What would you guys like to talk about? If you don't have any questions, obviously we can move on, but my guess is you're looking at your notes and you're thinking about stuff. So I'll give you another 5 minutes or something. We can go over whatever you like. Or if you don't have questions, we don't have to go over anything. Okay. Home is Drissa, right? Is that you, Drissa?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, Drissa. So Drissa has a question about the Jim Crow laws. This is one we didn't cover in too much detail. We might not have even covered it in class. It is on the slides. What are the Jim Crow laws? Have you heard of these before? Say it again. Segregation. Yeah. So these are laws that segregation that mandated segregation in the South, right, based on race or what we might call caste as well. I could try to find the slide as you guys are thinking about questions. What book do you think talked about these laws, if you had to guess? Yeah. Wilkerson's Cast. There's also the Sacred and Profane podcast, right? That American Idols episode. So both of those would be good for topics about caste. I think it's the one before this, though. So yeah. No, wait, was this one? That was after that. Yeah. So we talked about public segregation, Jim Crow laws. Maybe I'll just open this. 1 second. So they were enforced for about 100 years. So after, well, maybe I'll ask you, 1860s. What was happening in America in the 1860s? Civil War, yeah. So after the Civil War, what happens with the proclamation? No, the Emancipation Proclamation. I almost forgot the name. Emancipation Proclamation. The enslaved people are set free, right? And so in the 1860s, there's a question, right? Particularly in the South, what will the status of enslaved people be, or formerly enslaved people? And so these laws come into place, and they last for about 100 years, right? What happens in the 1960s? Martin Luther King, he was very active in the 60s, right? I think he died in 68, right? He was assassinated. The Civil Rights Movement, ring a bell? Martin Luther King, yeah, Civil Rights Movement. So after the Civil War, up to the Civil Rights Movement, you have these laws on the books that keep basically what this sign is calling colored people, right? Keeping black people or brown people and white people separate from each other. So that's what these laws were based on. and they really defined life in the South. It's really kind of an unbelievable thing to look back on, but it is true, right? And we're still coming to terms with this history in America, in terms of just how do we remember it? How do we think about it? So those are Jim Crow laws. Hopefully that is pretty clear. How does this play into the caste system? You're born into it. Yeah. Let's see. Do I have the pillars of caste here? Oh, yeah, there they are. Here are the pillars of caste. So heritability is talking about how you're born into it. Here are some pillars of caste. We don't have time to go over all the details of all of them, but they kind of help, and I'll just put this in writing, pillars of caste. These kind of help explain how the caste system works, right? And how it came to be in America. So like Leo just said a moment ago, you're born into it. So heritability is part of this conversation. Endogamy, what is endogamy? Endogamy? Yeah, it's about marriage. If you see Gamy at the end of a word, polygamy, monogamy, right? It's talking about marriage and relationships. So endogamy, end means sort of inward, right? So what is this talking about, endogamy?
Marriage inside the same caste.
Yes, marriage inside the same caste, exactly. And so these laws, the Jim Crow laws, also forced people to practice endogamy. It was illegal to get married outside of your caste. It's illegal to marry across race. There are even words for it, miscegenation. That is not on the review sheet, so I won't confuse you with it. But miscegenation laws are still on the books in some states. So they were just recently taken off, like within the last 20 years. Okay, purity and pollution. We'll get to that with the reading for today, so maybe we don't have to focus on that now. Other questions? Let's see. It's only been 10 minutes, so we can do this a little longer if you have questions. Leo? It is open book, yeah. So in terms of formatting, yeah, it's open note, open book. Let's see, did I write this here? Maybe I didn't write it here, but anyways, I'll make sure it's very clear on the exam itself. Open book, open notes. So yeah, bring your books to class, bring your notes to class. You can use digital notes, you can use the slides. So I encourage you to download the slides and have them available and searchable for the exam itself. One thing I ask you not to do is to use the internet. So don't Google stuff because first of all, it might be misleading. And second of all, you won't learn anything that way. And so if I were studying for this, I've said this before, but I'll say it again, is I'd look up things like Jim Crow laws, and then I would look to the slides and try to figure out things from the slides. If I can't really make sense of it, then I can go to the books, right? So this would be coming from Wilkerson, and I can read about it from Wilkerson. So you can go through that same process on the exam. The only problem with that is it's time, right? You have a limited amount of time. So the best thing would be to just know everything off the spot. You can go through it very quickly, but you will have some time to look stuff up. It's just it will be limited. I realized I missed Kristen's question. How long do the short answers have to be? They'll just be a paragraph. So in terms of how do these types of questions compare, I've said this before, but it's worth saying again. There'll be 10 quotation explanations. Those will be very short. Basically, I'll give you a quotation. Let's see. That one was pretty good. Let's say embed car. So he's not on the review sheet, so I won't be using this quote. Caste is an artificial chopping off of the population into fixed and definite units, each one prevented from fusing into another through the custom of endogamy, right? So here's somebody talking about endogamy. I could give you this quote. I could ask, who said this quote? And again, Ambedkar is not on the review sheet, so you don't have to know him. I could say, who said it? What is he talking about? He's talking about caste. And why is endogamy important in the caste system? Something like that. And you might have to write, one word, Ambedkar, and then one word, caste, and then something a little bit longer like endogamy keeps people marrying within their caste, something like that. So just a short sentence. So these ones should go pretty quickly. If you know them, they'll go very quickly, right? So when I'm doing practice tests, it's a little hard for me to judge because it just comes down to if you know it or if you don't. If you do, it takes 20 seconds, right? Word, sentence, boom, you're done. If you don't know it, you got to look it up, and that takes more time. So that's the quotation explanations. There are two short essay, and that will just ask you to write a paragraph for each. I'll give you 3 prompts, ask you to choose 2, so write 2 short essays in total. And that'll take a little more time, right? Because you'll have to write a whole paragraph. It'll be more interpretive. It'll be less like, what is this from? What does this say? It'll be more, have you been participating in class conversations and that sort of thing. Okay. Let's go back to the list. Other questions? I think I got everybody's questions so far. Anything specific you want to talk about? Formatting, specific terms, Leo? It's like a forum post. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. It's basically, here's this big interpretive question, write a paragraph about it. You don't have to cite specific pages. You can, right, if you want to. Say again? Yeah, just a paragraph or 2, exactly. But I do want you to engage the reading, right? So you don't have to say like, and on page 23, this is what they say. You can just say, at that time in the book, this happened, right? And that'll be good enough. Do we need a quote for short essays? Yeah, so I think I just answered you 10, but I'll say it again just so it's totally clear. You don't have to, you can if you want to. You don't need page numbers, and the reasoning is time is short, right? I know that you'll be working under a time limit, so I don't want to penalize you and force you to look up a bunch of page numbers. But I do want you to reference the reading. So it doesn't have to be direct quotes, but I do want you to make an argument, support that argument with references to the reading, right? So that's what Leo was asking. Basically, it's just like the forum post in that way. Other questions? So again, we're going to go over these 3 guys today. Sugriva, Vali, Hanuman. All right, well, we've done this for about 15 minutes. That's about how much time we wanted to spend. I'd be happy to take another question if you have one. If you don't, let's get started. Obviously, I record every class, and so if there's some big topic you don't remember at all, like cast or something like that, you can go back and look at the recordings. Hopefully you all know how to do that at this point. It's all on Moodle. If you have questions about that, obviously email me. I can help you. So let's get started. So last time, I guess first I'll say we finished the book. All right, so that's very exciting. Congratulations. It's not a short book. It's not a long book, but it's not a short book. I guess 150 pages, but each page is pretty packed, right? Do you notice that? It's like the pages go pretty slowly. So it is no small accomplishment to finish this book, so I would like to congratulate you on that. And today we'll try to finish everything with the book. We're going to go a little bit quickly. We're not going to have time for the breakout rooms, I don't think. We didn't in the last class, but that is fine. So we can just go over things together. So one thing I just, this is how we always run classes. I ask you these big questions, and then we go over them again at the beginning of class. Collins is taking a midterm. All right, well, welcome to class. We just covered some review of the midterm. If you have any questions about that, they're not a midterm, but
kicked up my number, and niggas is chopping it up over the text messages. He reacts me the same shit. He like, yeah, this the nigga from Snap, by the way. This is my real name. Hit me up from like a Gmail.
Okay. Collins.
Like Powell.
Yeah. Telling how it is. All right, I'm gonna mute you now, but I'm curious about who you're talking to. All right. Okay. Very interesting insights into students' lives that I usually don't get. All right. So Subhanika Rama. So last time we were talking about how the pursuit of pleasure can be dangerous, right? And this is something that might sound a little bit weird, right? I feel like in our society, pursuing pleasure is natural and normal and what you're supposed to do. You guys want to be happy, don't you? Yeah, of course you. Everybody wants to be happy. And so that's the whole point of life, is to be happy. But actually, this is very different. It's a very different way of thinking about what we might call happiness, and more specifically pleasure, right? We've got our duty, success, pleasure. So again, this is pleasure here. And there's a sense that by pursuing pleasure in the wrong way, it is not only a bad idea, it is downright dangerous. Surpanika What does she want? What is the pleasure that she is seeking? Who's Sopranica? What's her deal?
You wanna get married to Rama?
She want to get married to Rama, exactly. So she, we could say, lusts for Rama, right? She wants the pleasure of being together with Rama, and she wants it really bad, right? And again, it's something that my guess is you all have experienced at some point. This is a part of life. And what the story is telling you is that can get you in trouble. So what happened to her is she was mutilated, right? We could say it's because Lakshmana was mean, and that's true. He was mean to her. He violently chopped off her nose and her ears and really horrible stuff, right? So we could say it's his fault, but the book presents it because of her, right? She was too aggressive in seeking out pleasure. We see the same thing with Ravana. Here's this line, I pulled it from last time because it sort of echoed in my mind over the weekend. He says, I'll make her the queen of my empire and spend the rest of my days in obeying her command and pleasing her in a million ways. I'll do nothing else in life except enjoy her company, right? So he is basically saying, I'm going to dedicate my life to this woman, to pleasing this woman. And of course, he's saying that because he's just so attracted to her, right? He sees her and he just can't imagine a better partner in his life. He just wants her so bad. He says he'll do anything for her. And maybe one way we could talk about it is he would put his pleasure over his duty and his pursuit of success. Can you see that? Right? He's basically saying, my empire doesn't matter, my kingdom doesn't matter, all I care about is this woman. I got it so bad for her. And again, you know, we can see gender, it doesn't matter, it goes both ways. Women want the men want the women. You might notice it's both the demons, right? It's the bad guys who have this unbridled desire for the good guys. But the good guys want desire too, or have desires too. Rama wants the deer. Sita also wants the deer. So it's not like we good humans are protected against these desires. We also struggle with these same problems. So it shows that it's dangerous for them as well. And of course, Sita gets captured as a result. So this whole book, we could say, you know, especially the second half, this downfall of Ravana, and again, we finished the book so we can talk about it as a whole. This downfall of Ravana really comes back to this pursuit of pleasure, right? Why does Ravana get killed? And if he does get killed at the end, it's because he kidnaps Sita. Why does he kidnap Sita? He can't keep himself in check, right? And so these dangers can be traced back to pleasures in really throughout the book. Now, you know, you might remember there's a story saying where it's important to have some pleasure and have some space for pleasure in your life. And I think that is also true in this book. But this idea of pursuing them without control is also dangerous. So that's a little bit of review. Questions about this? Is that all pretty clear? Ravana, Sponica. Again, lots of characters here. I know that's one challenge in reading this book, but hopefully by the end it wasn't so bad. Actually, I don't want to embarrass anybody, but one of your classmates said that he really enjoyed reading this book. He said it was a pleasure to read. And so, you know, I just want to pass that message on to you guys. Hopefully you felt the same way. I know it was a hard book, particularly at the beginning, all these different names, all these different people. But by the end, you know, you kind of know who the characters are, and there's a pretty exciting story being told. So we're going to keep analyzing that story today. Now, last time we talked about animals and the caste system. I think this is where we left off last time, right? Now, let's see, I've lost my pillars of caste. Here they are. How does the caste system operate here? Can you make any sense of this? I mean, endogamy is a little bit weird to talk about, but the animals, you know, they can only reproduce with other animals of their own species, right? So that's kind of required. What about this last one, purity and pollution? How does that come into play in the animal hierarchy, in the animal caste system? We talked about that, didn't we? Purity. How does purity or pollution, how does purity come into play in this? Yeah, the food. How is food related to purity here? Some are more sacred. So the sacred ones, the horses and cows are the more sacred ones. They're at the top. What do horses and cows eat? Grass. So it's vegetarian, it's plentiful. So that we could say is the more pure kind of food. Monkeys and bears, they basically eat what humans eat. You know, it's a weird sort of thing to think about. But monkeys, you ever seen a monkey before? They're often very naughty and they try to steal things from you and they will eat whatever you're eating. Bears maybe might not approach you, but they break into people's houses and steal their picnic baskets. What about dogs and crows? What do they eat? They're dirty. No, and I warned all of the dog lovers. I know we love dogs in America. They're part of the family, that sort of thing. But this is actually a major issue for, let's say, South Asian Americans, right? Where there's this American love for dogs, but there's also this sort of South Asian, what to say, nervousness about dogs because they are, you know, seen as these kind of dirty animals because they eat indiscriminately, right? They eat all sorts of nasty stuff. They eat good stuff too. They just eat whatever's in front of them. They don't really care what they're eating. So again, we see purity and pollution. How does purity and pollution map onto the human caste system? Is purity and pollution part of the human caste system? This is a little bit of a review question, but we got an exam coming up. It's good to review. Purity and pollution, human caste system. What's the connection? Duty's good. There's a story about this. Where does the caste system come in the Rig Veda? The feet. Yeah, remember the feet? Yeah. Let's see. Do I still have the review sheet open? I guess I could open it here. Yeah. This guy, Purusha. Remember Purusha? He's in the Rig Veda. He's in the Hymn of Man. And so he's the one who gets chopped up into pieces, right? His mouth becomes the Brahmins and his feet become the low caste people. So there's something very similar happening here. Brendan remembered the feet, right? Because they're the dirty feet. There's a sense of these are dirty animals. And there's a sense that there are dirty people. So again, this is not like a pretty picture, right? The caste system is horrible and exploitative in many ways, but we can learn about it by thinking about its logic, right? By applying this impurity to dogs and to your feet and to humans and saying that those are all the same thing, all of a sudden you have low caste people being impure, being dirty, right? Whereas, of course, in reality, from a more compassionate perspective, nobody is dirty, right? This is all something that people make up, but it's a powerful image that people apply nonetheless. Okay, that's sort of a review. Are you guys ready to get back into the book? So why don't I make you read this? Because it's sort of a confusing moment, but we've read the whole book and now we can understand it better. It's on page 90. For those of you who have the ebook editions, it's the very beginning of chapter 6 about Vali. So you can follow along there, or you can just follow along on the slides. How about somebody reads this? Who'd like to read? Again, this is a way you can participate if you are a little bit shy in other circumstances. You're welcome to read, to participate. Who'd like to participate? So quiet. So many names whose voices I haven't heard in so long. Would anybody like to share their voice? Actually, I basically know all you guys. You guys are good. So a bit of a smaller class. It's easier to know all of you. Anybody want to read?
I'll do it.
Please, Joel, that'd be great.
The perfect man takes a false step, apparently commits a moral slip, and we ordinary mortals stand puzzled before the incident. It may be less an actual error of commission on his part than a lack of understanding on ours. Measured in eternity, such an event might stand out differently, but until we attain the breadth of view, we are likely to feel disturbed and question the action.
Very nice. Thank you, Joel. And so it's kind of a tricky little opening, right? It's the beginning of this chapter. I guess, first of all, we can just try to identify people. Who is the perfect man? That should be pretty straightforward, right? Who's the perfect man? We've been reading this book. about a perfect man? Who is,
The king,
well, he's not exactly the king. Who's this guy? Rama is the perfect.
Rama.
Yeah,
Rama, yeah.
Rama is the perfect man. Yeah, yeah. So maybe that wasn't as clear as I thought it was, but this is a book about how does a perfect man live, right? And again, if we take this as a scripture, which many people do, we can think this is how perfect people live. We're not all perfect, but Rama is, and Rama does things perfectly. He's the perfect man. Throughout most of the book, he's been perfect, right? And yet in this chapter, he's doing something weird, right? This is really our narrator, Narayan, talking to us. And he's like, this is a weird chapter. Something weird happens here. It's a little hard to understand what it is and why he does it. We ordinary mortals stand puzzled before the incident. And so clearly something weird happens here. What is the weird thing? What is the incident that is so weird? It's the sneak attack. I like the way you put that, Brenda. Yeah. So here's an image from Cambodia. I believe it's from Angkor Wat, right? It's like cut into stone. I think it's a reproduction. Like I think these more red-looking parts are not the same as the other parts. But in any case, regardless of how old it is or whatever else, some parts are missing. Maybe you can't tell. Like who are these guys though? Can you tell who these figures are? Are those humans fighting each other? No, what are they? They're monkeys. Yeah, so monkeys.
yeah,
I think Drissa was going to say monkeys. Yeah. So they are Sugriva and Vali. So if you couldn't tell, Sugriva and Vali are monkeys, and they're fighting each other here. And like Brendan said, there's a sneak attack. So who's doing the sneak attack? It is Rama with his
that
bow.
Rama.
Yeah, Rama's sneaking up on him from behind. So that's what's being depicted here. One of the monkeys cannot see him, and the other one is sort of his friend, and so he's protecting his friend. So Brendan already told us who is the monkey that he kills. It is Vali.
Valley.
Yeah, he kills Vali, exactly. So it might be hard to separate these two. They're brothers. Sugriva and Vali are brothers. But again, if you follow the story, they have a very different fate, right? So there are a lot of different ways we can think about this. The main question we have, though, is why does Rama shoot him in the back? I guess, first of all, why would this be a moral slip? Why is this a problem? Why is it bad to shoot someone in the back? You guys ever shoot people in the back? What's wrong with shooting someone in the back? You said 'cause
It is like kind of cheating. Cheating.
it's cheating? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's cowardly? Yeah. Yeah, if you want to fight someone, yeah, I mean, again, this is very patriarchal language. And as we'll see, this is a very disturbing scene. So I don't mean to promote this sort of activity. And probably by the end of this discussion, you'll have weird feelings about this book. But there's a sense that you got to fight them face to face. You know, there's a phrase, fight them like a man or whatever, right? And to shoot someone in the back, it's cowardly, right? It's not showing them the respect that perhaps they deserve in order to be fighting face to face. So hopefully that's pretty clear. We've got this weird moment where Rama is shooting the monkey in the back, and they're not just regular monkeys, right? How are these monkeys special? They're not the kind of monkey you might see like stealing bananas from tourists or something like that, right? These are special monkeys. Why are these monkeys special?
I think they used to be human and something happened to them. I don't know if they got cursed and they become monkeys and have their own kingdom.
Yeah, so like Driss is saying, they're sort of like humans. It's actually, they were not cursed. They were not ever humans, but they're sort of like almost, for whatever reason, monkeys can talk here, right? And these two monkeys in particular, they're like the ruling monkeys. Vali was the king for a while. We don't have time to go into the whole story, but Vali was the king for a while. He got into a fight with a demon. He was gone for a while. Sugriva comes, takes the throne back. Eventually, Vali comes back and he's like, hey, why'd you take my throne? What the hell's wrong with you? And he beats him up and gets rid of him. But Vali's very strong. They both can talk. And so there's sort of a weird sense of like, why are they monkeys, right? So that's another thing. that we'll be thinking about today. Maybe we can zoom out to make sense of this. What role do the monkeys play in this story? Maybe I'll put it a little differently. How do the monkeys help Rama after this scene? What do the monkeys do for Rama? This is an important question.
I think the monkey will help him fight Ravana.
Mm-hmm.
So it is by the help of the monkey that he will overcome Ravana's kingdom.
Yes, very good. Because Rama, he's just one person, right? So even though he's very powerful, he cannot defeat the whole army of Ravana. And so he wants Sugriva, that's this monkey, he wants Sugriva to help him, right? So how does he help him? Just like Drissa is saying, and just like Eric is saying, is he helps him get an army. Does that make sense? Right? He needs the army in order to find Sita, in order to defeat Ravana. So if we come back to this scene, it starts to make more sense, right? You have these two brothers who are fighting. Rama wants to help one of the brothers, because if he helps one of the brothers, then he gets help in return. Does that make sense? It's almost like divide and conquer. Are you familiar with this idea? You ever heard of this before? Divide and conquer. It's sort of a colonialist approach. An example comes to mind is Singapore. Have you heard of Singapore? So Singapore is a very small city on the southern tip of Malaysia. It used to be a part of Malaysia. How did it become separate? Is the British government went in, right? The East India Company, the British Empire. This was maybe 150 years ago, maybe a little longer. A guy named Raffles, and people kind of still celebrate him today. There are like shopping malls named after him. So he went to Malaysia. He found this prince, and he was like, "Hey, you're not getting the recognition you deserve, are you? Let's help you out. We can overthrow the government, and when you get Malaysia back, you can give us Singapore. How does that sound?" And he was like, "Great, let's do it, right?" And of course, the British Empire was really strong at that time. They pull it off, and so there's something very similar happening here. Rama sees an opportunity. He wants to help one of these monkeys, and in turn, the monkey will help him. And does it work? Is he successful?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, he was successful. It mostly works. Now we're still left wondering, why does he shoot him in the back? It's still not so clear. Why doesn't he fight him face to face? Why does he take some other approach? I think we can understand a little better why he wants to help one monkey at the expense of the other. But why does he shoot him in the back? Can anybody make sense of this off the bat? Why did Rama?
Yeah,
what do you think, Drissa?
I think this guy Valley is kind of is so powerful, and he thought that no human could kill him. So Rama have to shoot him that way in order to defeat him.
So maybe Rama was scared. Maybe. I think you are correct to say that Vali was very powerful. And in fact, as Vali is dying, he's like, "Hey, why didn't you ask me for my help? Like, I could have helped you, man." And they have this really long conversation talking about why Rama shot him in the back. And Rama's kind of weird about it, right? He's very dismissive. He sort of brushes him off. So maybe part of it is he was scared. The book never really tells us. So this is something I want to spend some time together on it today and sort of figure this out. Maybe this is a good question to help us think about it, is how are monkeys depicted in the Ramayana? On the one hand, they're very smart. They're smarter than real monkeys, right? They're more like humans. On the other hand, compared to the humans in the book, right, compared to Rama and Lakshmana, for example, they're a little irresponsible. Did you guys notice that? So again, we're going to jump around a little bit, but I think it'll help us make sense. After Rama helps him out, it becomes the rainy season. He's sort of stuck, and here I kind of love this painting. Isn't it beautiful? You got the rain coming down, Rama and Lakshmana sitting here in the woods. The elephants are running, and it's just something like you can almost hear the thunder in the clouds or something. And so they're just sort of hanging out, talking to each other. And do the monkeys initially fulfill their promise? Is Sugriva, is he a very responsible monkey?
No, he forgot, and I think he spent his time drinking and enjoying women,
Yes,
and he didn't go to help Rama.
he's a very irresponsible monkey. Yeah, Eric said he got drunk and forgets. That's exactly right. He has parties. He's really excited to be back, right? And Lakshmana comes in and he's ready to like murder all of the monkeys. He says he's going to like really crack some skulls, and they get lucky that he changes his mind and he shames them. He's like, Rama is sitting on the bare ground. He's living on roots and greens, and you're here getting drunk with all of your monkey women friends. What the hell is wrong with you, Sugriva? Right? He really kind of lashes into him. And Sugriva says he's sorry. He failed in his duty. He failed in his promise. He lost himself in pleasure. Look, we've got duty and pleasure in the same sentence. Does that jump out at anybody else? Very, as we've seen, this it shows up again and again. He's putting pleasure over duty. Very bad monkey, right? Very irresponsible. And so if we go back to this idea of, I know we're jumping around, but if we go back to this idea of kind of a caste system for the monkeys, it's just like caste systems for people, right? This is more class than caste, but if you think about why are there homeless people in New York, it's sort of an uncomfortable topic, right? There's so much wealth in New York, right? If you just zoom out, like, why can't we just give a little bit of wealth to the homeless people? What a lot of people would say is because they're drug addicts, because they'll just spend the money on alcohol, because they don't take care of themselves. It's really their fault that they're down at the bottom of society. Have you ever heard this sort of argument before? Absolutely, right? It's all over the place. And part of the reason is because sometimes it's true, right? And so I don't mean to say that there's no truth to that argument, but I would also say sometimes it's overstated. We see something very similar happening here. Why are monkeys, oops, that's not what I wanted to go to. Why are monkeys seen as lower class, lower caste than the humans? Is because they're worse behaved. They're irresponsible. They need someone to tell them what to do, right? And the best monkey, which is the best monkey out of the three? Where are my monkeys? Where'd they go? Here they are. Which is the most virtuous of these three monkeys?
Hanuman.
Hanuman. Yeah. And what is special about Hanuman? Well, this is the line.
I think he is son of a wind, and he's also the general of the army.
Yeah, so Drissa is correct to say actually all three of these monkeys have kind of a divine relationship, which might explain why they can talk. They also become part of the army. Is there a caste system in the army? Maybe caste isn't the right word. Is there a hierarchy in the army? Absolutely, right? That's like what the army is founded on. And the lowest class of the army is full of monkeys here, right? And that's usually how armies often operate too, right? Low caste people get sent to die in various wars. If we think about what makes Hanuman different from the other monkeys, is his mind is always fixed on Rama. And so there's sort of a weird message being sent here, right? The lower caste people, if they revere and respect the higher caste people, then they become the more ideal being. And Hanuman is celebrated. He's a very famous god now. So if you ever go to India, you'll be able to find entire temples dedicated to him. So he's a good one to know. If you know the story behind him, you know why he's a monkey, even though he is this low caste kind of creature, this low caste kind of figure. Through his dedication to Rama, through his faith in Rama, he is raised up, right? And he becomes sort of an ideal disciple of the perfect being of Rama. What's going on here? It's kind of a crazy picture, isn't it? Everything's on fire. People are all running around. I wrote here, Hanuman burns Lanka. What is Lanka?
I think Lanka is the city where Ravana lived.
Yeah.
And that's where also he took Sita. That's where he had Sita.
Yes, exactly. And so Hanuman went there looking for it. Is Lanka a real place? Have you ever heard of Lanka before? Sri Lanka.
I heard Sri Lanka, but
Sri Lanka. Where is Sri Lanka? Has anybody been there?
In Asia.
In Asia? That's a good start. The other side of what? Not quite. Sri Lanka. So it's an island. Can you see this? What is this landmass here? It's India. So it's a little island off the southern coast of India. And so, again, this is a story that takes place in India. And we can see, this is something I'm encouraging you to see, this idea of demons and bad guys, that sort of stuff. It feels like kind of a fantasy story, but it's a real place, right? And it's not to say that there are always wars between India and Sri Lanka, but there is at least a little bit of history of fighting between southern India and Sri Lanka that goes on today. There were kind of horrible civil wars in Sri Lanka in the 90s that are kind of follow this dynamic where you have influences from India fighting against people in Sri Lanka. Okay, so let's go back to it. So we've got the demons in the city. We've got, as Driss already told us, Sita is being held. She's being held captive there. She's captured. Hanuman, because he remembers blessings from Rama, he's able to grow really large and pass the water that separates Lanka from India. And he finds Sita. He's looking around and trying to find her. He finds her. She's being badly treated, right? People are kind of yelling at her and kind of abusing her. And so he sends her a message, though, right? I think there's a ring he passes on to her, and he says, "Don't worry, Rama's coming for you. We found you. We're going to save you," right? And then he eventually gets captured, and they try to light him on fire, but only his tail is on fire. And so then he runs around the city, lights everything on fire. And so it's this really crazy moment where it's sort of the beginning of the end for Ravana. Okay. Wait, it's not zooming. There we go. Okay, so that's a little background on the monkeys. Let's go back to our initial question. I apologize for jumping around, but I think it'll help us answer it. How are the monkeys depicted in the Ramayana? Well, again, this is something I'm pushing, but I think it's true. We have to think about it in terms of caste. Humans are higher caste than the monkeys. The monkeys get put in the army. Who is the good monkey? Is the monkey who has faith in Rama. Who are the bad monkeys? The monkeys who don't have faith, who forget about Rama and don't respect him as much as he deserves, right? So if we come back to this question of why did Rama kill Vali in the way that he did, can we answer this now? Why did he shoot him in the back and give him no respect? A really lame excuse? Yeah. What was the lame excuse? So yeah, Brendan clearly read it very carefully. There are these weird conversations where it's like you gotta like keep your promises to your friends and all these sort of weird conversations, and it's not very convincing, right? I think in the end we really need to bring caste into this. He shot him because he's a monkey, right? Because he's lower than him. And as we continue to read this chapter, I think there are some other details, like Brendan pointed out. There's this sense that Vali might be a bit of a usurper. Do you guys know this word, usurp? I realize that maybe people don't use this word. Usurp, does that ring a bell? It's actually a very interesting word. It's very specific, but it works for this circumstance. A usurper is a person who takes a position of power or importance illegally or by force, right? So someone can usurp the throne, is basically to take the throne by force. And so that's sort of what happened to Rama, right? He was supposed to be on the throne. There's a little bit of a sense that Sugriva was supposed to be on the throne. So there are other ways to explain this. But I think if you take caste out, it still doesn't really make any sense. One last piece to really push this over the edge, maybe we can skip that one, is this. Why don't we read this? This is important enough to get a little read. So yeah, Joel did a great job last time. Would anybody else like to read? Page 104, if you want to look in the book, which is the end of chapter 6, at the very end. Or you can read from the slides. Who would like to read? Nobody? Reading? Going once? Going twice? You just want to hear me talk the whole time? Is that what this is? I can read. Okay. Oh, yeah. Well, Joel's, well, yeah, if you'd like to, Joel, you're welcome to. I don't want to take the opportunity away from you. You want to do it again, Joel?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
While other gods confer boons after being asked, you confer them on the mere utterance of your name. Great sages have attempted after, how do you say that?
It's a weird word
Aeons
where
or
the A and the E come together to sound like an E. So it's eon.
eons of atrocities
Austerities.
to obtain a vision of austerities, my bad, to attain a vision of God, but you have bestowed it on me unasked. I feel proud and happy at this moment.
Very good. So who is saying this quotation? Again, this is what I'll ask you to do on the exam. Who's saying this quotation? Volley. This is Volley.
Value.
Yeah. He's got an arrow sticking. I know we talked about him getting shot in the back. You could imagine Rama hiding behind this tree, shooting him from this, a disguised space, the sneak attack that Brendan talked about. He's got his hands together. What are these hands together? It's almost like that emoji, right? That people use all the time now. He's praying. Who is he praying to? Praying to the gods above? Kind of, but not really. Is there a god in the picture that he's praying to? He's praying to Rama. Praying to Rama. And what is he saying? Just as Joel read so nicely for us. Thank you, sir. May I have another? Right? That's what he's saying. What a ridiculous scene. He just got shot in a disgraceful way. And what does he say? Is other gods, you have to ask for these blessings, right? But here you are coming out of nowhere and giving me these blessings without even, and I don't even have to ask for it. I feel proud and happy at this moment. Now, if we take this and apply it to human society, what is this saying about the interactions between high and low caste people? Thank you, high class person, for abusing me, maybe even taking my life. Thank you for interacting with me in any sort of fashion at all. Most people would ignore me or only give me attention if I asked for it, but I didn't even ask for it. You gave me this loving arrow in my chest without me even having to ask for it. Thank you so much. I feel blessed and proud in this moment. Again, can we make sense of this without, this hierarchy, without the system of high and low, of Rama being so pure and holy and him being so low? It doesn't make sense, right? It only makes sense when we make this great separation between these people. It's a gross moment, right? If I'm making you feel uncomfortable, it's kind of on purpose. It is an uncomfortable chapter. And I like the way that Narayan treats it to a certain degree. He doesn't glorify it. He says he's making a mistake here, but at the same time, this is a very old book, and this is a book that supports a caste system, and this is how it supports it, right? I think there's no other way to think about it. Okay, that's it for the monkeys. Any questions about that? We've got 25 minutes. That's a lot of time. We've already gone over the monkeys pretty thoroughly. Let's, I guess, first of all, let's look at this. Just a summary of events. I knew we would run out of time, so I just wanted to make sure this is out here for you. The monkey army comes together. They go all over the countryside to try to find Sita. Eventually, Hanuman finds her. We talked about that scene a moment ago. Ravana has a meeting. His brother, Vibhashana, which he's not on the review sheet, so you don't have to worry about him. But his brother kind of challenges him. Brother switches sides and helps the good guys at some point. There's a final battle, and the battle goes on for like pretty long, right? It's like 10 pages of action and fighting and special weapons and kind of crazy stuff. And then finally, there's this trial by fire, which I want to make sure we get to as well. So a lot of details there. We're going to skip most of it because it's pretty, I would argue, pretty easy to understand. It's just armies and meetings and fighting and all that sort of stuff. But there's some more confusing stuff at the end. Before we wrap up the last part of the book, any questions about all of this stuff? Is that pretty clear to everybody? The part I want to get to is here at the very, very end of the book. So to just sort of set the scene, again, we have the monkey army. Who's this blue guy with 10 heads and many, many arms?
Dr. Ravana.
Ravana, yeah, exactly. He's the bad guy. This is a very old portrait. It's at least like 100 years old. I think it's at the Met still. It was at the Met about last year when I taught this course, and there was coronavirus was, I guess, only threatening to come. But yeah, there. Well, I guess maybe I should write this out. You guys know about the Metropolitan Museum of Art? You guys been there before? Otherwise known as the Met. Yeah, exactly. So there are images from the Ramayana that were at the Met. At least there were last year. I don't know if they're still there now. So I would normally encourage you to go there, but now it is sort of dangerous to do that. So I don't encourage you to go there. But if you want to go there, you can. So anyways, this is Ravana, bad guy. Again, we see a caste system thing happening here. We have the high caste guy standing on top of a low caste monkey so he can battle with his powerful enemies, right? If this doesn't describe the caste system in an army, I don't know what does. We have monkeys fighting against demons. It's this really exciting battle scene, right? And then finally, spoiler alert, but you guys already know this, Ravana gets killed. And in this final moment, we have kind of an interesting reveal. Rather than torture you guys and make you read some more, I'll just, I can read this one. So page 146, why don't we look at it? Let's see, 146, getting toward the end. It's the very end of chapter 12, Rama and Ravana in battle for the ebook followers. Page 146, 147. So they're exchanging these weapons, and Rama brings out this special weapon called the Brahma Astra. And so he shoots it out, and he kills him. And here's the scene as he's dying. Wait, I've lost it. Page 146. So this is at the bottom. Rama watched him fall. Now on his face. Yeah, so now one noticed Ravana's face aglow with a new quality. Rama's arrow had burnt off the layers of dross. What is dross? You guys know what dross is? Something worthless, rubbish. It's often with something valuable, right? It's almost like separating the wheat from the chaff. Have you ever heard of that before? Where you find the valuable thing and you pull away like the husk. You want to get the edible part. So that's what dross is talking about, is that husk. It's the outward worthless stuff on the outside. So we're burning off these layers of dross. The anger, the conceit, cruelty, lust, egotism, which had encrusted his real self, and now his personality came through in its pristine form of one who is devout and capable of tremendous attainments. His constant meditation on Rama, although as an adversary, now seemed to bear fruit as his face shone with sincerity and serenity and peace. And it keeps going, but let's stop there. So what do we see happening here? What is this talking about? We've got the dross coming off and revealing his true form. What is Ravana's true form then? His real self. His personality. What is Ravana's real self? What is this? Say again.
Is a demon.
He is. So this is a confusing moment. That's why I wanted to highlight it for you. So Drissa is correct. He is a demon, but he is also a Brahmin. Now, what caste is Rama? So Rama is like a perfect human / god even. What is his caste though? And this is where the details get really confusing because they're all kind of mapping on each other and almost conflicting with each other. What is Rama's caste? Can anybody answer that?
I thought it was Brahmin also.
He's not Brahmin. And that's why I'm pointing this out. It's easy to assume that, right? Because he's a god and all. But what is his occupation? What is his father's occupation? He's a prince, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what does that mean? Who are the royalty? Aren't they the noble royal, let's say royal warrior caste, right? The kshatriya. Is that the highest one? Which one's higher, Brahmin or kshatriya? Brahmin is higher. So we see caste system kind of sneaking in again, and I will emphasize this more with another example. But this idea of Ravana having this pure, pristine self is basically answering the question, how can a demon be also a Brahmin, right? The demonic parts are on the outside. His anger, lust, egotism, that's the outside. His real self is pure and pristine. What about this idea he's constantly meditating on Rama, although as an adversary? What is an adversary? What does it mean to meditate on someone as an adversary? Partner? Adversary is more like an opponent or even an enemy. What does it mean to meditate on someone as an enemy? Have you guys ever done that before? Scheming? Yeah. I hate that Rama so much. I'm going to come up with a plan and I'll get him. I'll show him. Have you ever had someone live in your head rent free? Isn't that what the kids are saying these days? Heard that phrase on the Twitter before. So in any case, that's what's going on here, right? Ravana is thinking about Rama from a hateful perspective, but because Rama is so good, it still helps purify him of all this external bad stuff, right? It's kind of an amazing moment. All right, let's continue the scene because we're not quite done yet. Now, Rama, how much time we got? Yeah, we got plenty of time. Rama's inspecting the body. They readjusted it. I'm looking at the next page now, 147, just a little further down in the middle there. They readjusted Ravana's blood-stained body. Rama noticed, to his great shock, a scar on Ravana's back and said with a smile, "Perhaps this is not an episode of glory for me. I seem to have killed an enemy who was turning his back and retreating. Perhaps I was wrong in shooting this special weapon, the Brahmastra, into him." So what is Ravana's problem? Why is he saying this is maybe not an episode of glory for him? What's he concerned?
Because he thought he shoot him from the back, and at that point he would be a coward.
Yes, this is kind of familiar, right? It's a little bit of a strange thing to say after having just shot someone in the back. Now, just so we're all on the same page, a little further down, Ravana's brother Vibhashana says, "Don't worry, it's an old scar in the old days, blah, blah." So it's an old scar from some other time. You didn't shoot him in the back. And he says, "Okay, good." He accepts the explanation. And at the very bottom, he says, "Honor him, cherish his memory, so that his spirit may go to heaven where he has his place. Now I will leave you to attend to his funeral arrangements befitting his grandeur." Now I want to remind you, this is the guy who kidnapped Rama's wife. Why is Rama being so respectful to this guy? If we compare it to the monkey, Vali did nothing to him, and he shot him in the back like an animal, right? Now,
because he's a Brahmin, so he's like a higher class person.
Exactly. When we think about the caste system, it starts to make sense, right? He's a higher caste person. Zamo wrote, it's honor in a direct message. Exactly. It doesn't make sense without this consideration that he's just a higher caste than the monkeys are, right? Otherwise, this behavior really makes no sense at all. Yeah, so Ravana is a demon. He's also a Brahmin. He's both. Who is? No. Just so we're totally clear, I'll write in the chat. Ravana, the bad guy, the blue guy here. I shouldn't say the blue guy because Rama is also blue, a different type. Ravana, the 10-headed guy, the bad guy, he is a Brahmin. He's a demon, but he's also Brahmin. He usurps, right? Remember, he usurps the position of power, but he doesn't belong there, right? He's a Brahmin. He's not supposed to be the king of the world. He took it, right? It's against his dharma, actually. So who's supposed to be in charge? Rama, who, of course, he's a god, perfect human, avatar. He's a king. Let's just call him a king class, right? The royal class, I guess is a better word. Is that clear? And of course, Vali, he's a monkey, and he's a lower class or lower caste, let's say, right? And so we can see how this stacks up. So what is this storytelling? What instructions can we derive from the story? It's a story for the royal class, right? Telling them how to behave. They need to respect Brahmins, even if they're evil, even if they do horrible things. They still must be respected. They still must have the proper funerals and this sort of thing. Lower caste people, even if they do nothing wrong, they can still be mistreated if it is to the advantage of the higher caste people. Okay, we've got 10 minutes. And we've got one more scene I'd like to discuss. Sita lights a fire and jumps in it. Why would she ever do that?
I think Rama thought that she slept with Ravana. So at that point, it think that she's not anymore pure for him. That's why she also think that if she cannot be with Rama, there is no meaning to live for her. That's why she asked Lakshana to set a fire, and she get into the fire, but the god of the fire did not allow the fire to burn him because they already know that she was pure. So they returned her alive.
Yeah, very nicely explained, Joseph. Thank you. Yeah, so just we can go back to the quote here because Drizza summarized it so nicely. You would expect at the end of this trial and tribulation, I compared it to Super Mario. What happens at the end of Super Mario is you save the princess and everybody's happy, right? That's how this story is supposed to end. But we see Rama acting really weird. Maybe should I force you guys to read? Will anybody volunteer to read in 3 seconds? 1, 2, 3. No, all right, I'll just read that. So Rama says, "My task is done. I've now freed you." He's talking to Sita. "I've now freed you. I've fulfilled my mission. All this effort has been not to attain personal satisfaction for you or me," which is another way of talking about pleasure, right? That's how I would interpret that. Personal satisfaction for you, for me. It was to vindicate the honor of the Ikshvahu race, which is his clan, right? It's like his family name, and to honor our ancestors' codes and values. After all this, I must tell you that it's not customary to admit back to the normal married fold a woman who's resided all alone in a stranger's house. There can be no question of our living together again. And so, just like Drissa said very accurately, Rama suspects her, right? Even if she didn't sleep with him, right? The fact that she spent the night in another man's house, there's a very clear rule that she cannot be let back into his house. And so he is basically implying that perhaps she was being unfaithful. She was doing something impure, right? This question of her purity comes up, which of course is one of the pillars of caste. So we see that operating here as well. And how does she defend her purity? Well, we'll see that in the next scene. What about, could you put this in terms of duty, success, pleasure? Can anybody, pleasure, kind of translate this scene into those aims of life? On the face of it, this makes 0 sense. But if we put it into language of duty, success, pleasure, I would argue we can make sense of it. Even, I don't encourage you to agree with this, but I do encourage you to make sense of it. How can we make sense of it with duty, success, pleasure? What is Rama thinking about?
I think it was about duty here.
Yeah.
because
Duty to whom? What sort of duty is he trying to keep here?
well, duty to his, I would say, to his family name or to his ancestors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what he says, right? To his family name, to honor his ancestors. And so again, if we think about the process of having children, the process of being married, one way to approach it is for pleasure, right? And that's what Ravana wanted to do. That's what many people do, right? That's is because it is indeed delightful to be in a nice relationship. But Rama's saying he doesn't care about that. He doesn't care about the pleasure aspects of it. He's saying it would be an affront to his ancestors to be with a woman who has slept with another man. Now, we can think about sort of biological explanations of this, right? If somehow she were pregnant with another man's child and brought that child into his house, his ancestors would be alarmed, right? There's a lot of patriarchy going on here. But I think, if we put it in this language of duty, right? Rama is trying to uphold his duty to this patriarchy, then we can almost make sense of it. Now, the good sort of ending to this is Sita. Of course, she lights this fire, and she proves her purity. And just like Drissa said, we've got this Agni, god of fire, right? Great god of fire, who carries her out from the fire, and she proves her purity, and everybody lives happily ever after, right? But actually, there's sort of a continuation on this story where people start to make fun of Rama for having taken her back, and we get an even more kind of misogynistic end to this. So if you're interested in that, here's a cartoon called Sita Sings the Blues. It's a little bit old at this point. I think it's like somewhere on the order of like 15 years old, relatively early days of internet animation, but kind of an interesting one. It takes a bit of a feminist take on this story, and it kind of shows these final scenes in a pretty entertaining fashion. I guess actually we have 5 minutes. We could talk about it. Do you guys have any questions about this final scene before we watch a video in our last 5 minutes? Okay, well, why don't we watch it then? Because again, it's sort of entertaining, and it's not a bad way to review for this exam, because it'll, allow you to see some of these things in animated form. It's not a perfect telling of the story. It just shows part of it. So this is like kind of an autobiographical thing. And let me optimize. That's what I want to do.
Oh gosh. Later, I know what he did. What did he do when he saw her in Lanka? Hug her and kiss her.
No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. He was very cold.
Why was he cold to Sita?
Actually, I don't. To be honest with you, I'm very shaky on this point. I don't know what he actually.
You can
did.
make it up.
You have lived in another man's house, so you are unfit to be my wife.
What?
I have done my duty in rescuing you from the enemy and avenging the insult to myself. I have terrible suspicions about your character and conduct. Ravana was aware of your beauty. He cannot have kept you in his house for so long without touching you. The very sight of you is painful. You are free to go wherever you want. I have no more use for you, Sita.
If I had known this, I would have killed myself before and spared you this war. Build me a funeral pyre. I cannot bear to live. Despite my virtues, my husband has rejected me.
He's obviously doubting her pureness.
I find the whole pureness thing really odd.
I find it really
She was
weird
not a
that
virgin,
nobody
she was
is
already married
commending
to a guy.
Ravan for not forcibly. I mean, I know we shouldn't commend
what if
somebody
he
for that.
raped- what if
but
he raped
yeah,
her?
but in terms of villains, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we expect villains to be villainous.
Yes.
This is a guy that's like, if you don't come to me willingly, I will not touch you.
Right.
I will not force you in my house.
Right.
I will not force myself on you.
Well, he never had sex with her, did he?
No, as
No.
Sita proved over and over again.
By
Yeah.
trial of fire.
Here's kind of the absurd part of this, the blues part.
Sweetheart, I love you, think
Okay.
the world of you,
So that's
but
enough.
I'm afraid you don't.
As you can see, it's sort of a bizarre retelling. This, I guess, says it's only from 2009, so it's not so long ago. 2008. I guess it's a little long. So, anyways, if you enjoyed that little bit and you're curious, you can check it out. Again, it shows that this is not a perfect story, right? It doesn't live up to our moral standards. As you can tell, I don't think we should cancel it and throw it out like so many things, like Dr. Seuss, right? That's a hot button issue right now. Dr. Seuss, who would have thought? But at the same time, I think what we can do is sort of the double vision thing. You guys remember double vision? What's double vision all about? That's a good thing to review for the exam. What's double? Yeah, inside outside perspective, right? We can step into this caste system and see the logic of the caste system, see the logic of the purity and pollution, but still recognize that it is not real, right? It's not the only way to see reality and to see that in reality there is only one kind of human, the human being, the Homo sapiens, right? And that we are all the same level of purity and pollution and so forth. So we can see both of these things at the same time. And actually, I think by understanding these mechanisms of purity and pollution, we become somewhat immune to them, right? We can see through them. Because again, as I brought up the homeless person example, these things happen in our lives too, whether we recognize it or not. So, all right, so we're out of time. Any last questions or comments? Hopefully I didn't ruin the Ramayana for you, but there are some dark aspects to it, just as there are, maybe interesting